Welcome to The Thriving Marriage, the podcast for those who want to get their spouse back in love with them and truly thrive.
You'll learn why 95% of people don't save their marriage and the secret method no one else is talking about that will change everything for you. Are you ready? Let's turn tragedy to triumph.
Here are your hosts, international marriage experts, Mark Johnston and Heather Choate.
Welcome everyone here to the Thriving Marriage podcast. My name is Heather Choate and I'm here with Mark Johnston, our international marriage expert here at High Thrive Coaching. Mark, how are you doing today?
I'm doing great. Hello, everyone.
Hello. I'm doing fabulous. My kids have saved up their pennies and dollars and they have purchased hoverboards. And so they have dedicated our main living area to a hoverboard race. So if you hear more background noise than normal, that's what's going on in the Choate household.
I think everyone's a bit used to hearing kids in the background with us on occasion. But, just out of the sheer number of children that we have between our respective families, it happens, and it's hard. It just happens.
Yeah, Mark and I, when we were first creating this podcast, we thought about recording studio, making super clean, super professional, like a lot of podcasts out there. But that just isn't really our thing. We're family people. We work from home and we like it that way. So here you get us raw and real and background noise. Awesome. So today we're talking about something I'm really, really excited about. We're talking about grudges. Why would I be excited about grudges? Well, I'll tell you in a minute. So we're going to talk about how to stop holding on to grudges once and for all. As we all know, forgiveness in marriage, it can be really, really challenging. And in fact, I would say it can be even the very definition of damning. And so why am I excited about grudges? Well, because honestly, this is something that I have felt in my life and was probably the root cause of many of the challenges that I've faced in my relationships. And so learning how to let go of grudges, of bitterness, of pain, and becoming free of that has truly transformed my life. And Mark and I, we've seen numerous people experience that as well. And it's one of the most beautiful things to see that healing take place in your life. I feel like we should cue a chorus of Amazing Grace or something right now. Just kidding. All right. But we're going to really talk about that today. Before we get to that, we're going to talk about our client win of the week. This is shared with permission from Stacy. And she says, "Win, my mindset is in a really healthy place right now. Anyone who's struggling, please make sure this is your biggest priority. The brilliant videos Heather does and also others you can find online, like guided meditations to feel unconditional love, confidence, empowered, are all gold. It's been 9 months for me now since my husband left. I love him so much and heart still aches for him so badly. But I am now trying to focus on the relationship I want rather than the person I want. Because if he can never give me what I want or need or see my worth or believe our marriage is worth fighting for, then ultimately I don't want him. I hope it will be I hope it will be with my husband again, but if not, then I have grown so much as a person and raised my standards to where I know I won't ever settle for less than I deserve. I'm still fighting for my marriage every day in so many ways. We have made a lot of progress, although it's not where I would like things to be. We are not back together, yet we still have hope. I still have hope. I'm putting myself first, physically, mentally, emotionally, and it feels amazing. I hope this gives hope and inspiration to whoever reads it, because believe me, I was at rock bottom and I'm so proud of the work I've done on myself to get here. It does take time and effort and it's not a quick fix. I might not feel quite so strong tomorrow, but then days are becoming less. I think she's saying it's those days are becoming less and my good days are becoming more. Don't give up on yourselves or on your marriages. And so thank you, Stacy, for sharing with us your journey. And Mark and I were always going to be honest and integritous with you guys. And bottom line is we don't save every single marriage. And there's things that we cannot control. Our other half, right? Our spouse, our partner, there's going to be decisions that they make despite our best efforts and our desires to restore our relationship, to stop a divorce, to end an affair. And so we never make a declaration like every marriage is going to be saved. However, we do believe that you need to look at yourself and solve those root causes in you so that you can then attract the things that you want in your future, whether that be with this person or with another person. That level of healing and that level of transformation is what we're really all about. And that's the biggest milestone or hallmark of success here at High Thrive Coaching, is that we heal and we move forward. So huge congratulations to Stacy for shifting that mindset, working on herself, becoming a rock within herself. So
I noticed that you had like highlighted a few parts on this, but you ended up reading the whole thing, and I actually liked that you did that, Heather, because this was, I've met with Stacy a number of times, and her story is just really great. I distinctly remember when I first started meeting with her, and just like she was saying, she was kind of in a rough place at first, and I can see the transformation over the months, that she is in a much healthier place. And just the whole post was really good there in terms of, kind of demonstrating a little bit of that journey and the importance of mindset.
Absolutely. All right, so let's dive into grudges, what I'm super excited to talk about. So if you've been following our podcast for a while, you know that we like to get clarity on like definitions of what we're talking about, so we know we're all talking about the same thing. So Mark, in your expert opinion, what is a grudge?
Well, I thought it would just be simplest here to even go into, it almost seems cliche just to go to the dictionary. And, so I put it into the Google as I was creating the outline here today. And it's just, it was a lot about holding on to past pain or past offenses. And I thought, for the sake of just kind of making sure we're all on the same page, I thought that was a fitting definition. Now, the reason why we bring this up, though, and the where I think that the reason why we need to discuss it all is because oftentimes these grudges get past. They people hold on to these things past a point where it would really make sense. Heather, I don't know if you've seen this a lot in some of the people that we work with, but we see a lot of people make some huge changes in their lives, and then still we see their spouse holding on to what used to be happening. All those past offenses, past pain, and it can be a really big hurdle or obstacle to get past. And at the same time, like this is the whole point of this discussion is, like here are all these past pains that people just can't seem to let go of, and it causes so many problems for recovery, repair, for healing, that we felt like we needed to really focus in on this on the podcast today. It was we see this a lot, essentially.
Right, and it's kind of the heart of the entire PATH method. And if you are unfamiliar with our PATH method, I know we have a lot of new people joining us all the time, and so welcome. But go back and listen to some of our past master classes or our past podcast episodes where we go really deep into the PATH method. What we found after working with numerous couples over the years was that making positive change alone wasn't enough. Like Mark said, like we see people make incredible changes and really become a better version of themselves, and their spouse is still saying, you know what, I can see that you're making these changes, but I'm still going to leave. And we were, Mark especially was like, what's missing there? And uncovered something that very few people, if any, are even talking about. And that's this idea of changing their story, their narrative. Because if you make all these positive changes and they're still leaving, then obviously there's something there. And what's there is that pain and is that story justifying their reasons for leaving. And a lot of that does come from holding on to grudges and that defense mechanism that comes up to protect yourself from pain. Mm-hmm. So that's exactly what we talk about here. They help protect the grudge bearer from further pain. And we can kind of understand why that happens, right, Mark? Like to a certain point, it even makes sense that I've been hurt and there has to be this, I think, an adjustment period, a period of I need to protect myself. And so I'm going to distance myself from you. I'm going to make sure this never happens to me again. And so we put up a wall there, right? And let's talk a little bit about the individual responsibility piece of this, because this, when I was going through our outline, like our notes for today, I thought this part was really, really intriguing.
Yeah, so essentially what we're talking about here is why a grudge would make sense in the first place. Like here in our program, we always like to approach problems as if it's actually a viable solution. Like, as odd as that makes sense. Like, so an issue with anger, for instance, we want to approach that as like, and saying, okay, how is that anger actually a solution to something? Or how is the affair a solution to something? Because somewhere along the line, those actions, these problems are justified. And unless we approach it from some understanding, it's really hard to actually come up with any sort of solution. So Heather is mentioning here that these grudges certainly do play a role in protecting the grudge bearer, the person who's holding on to this pain, protects them from further pain. I'm thinking specifically, in our work, we encounter a lot of people who have rough childhoods or may have experienced things like abuse. And so, sometimes a takeaway from those experiences is that the person kind of holds on to this pain and they say, I'm going to shut people out. I'm not going to trust people. They're holding on to a grudge, essentially. But the whole purpose of that is protection. If they shut people out, if they hold on to this pain, if they keep their guard up, then they won't be hurt again. Now, you're mentioning something about responsibility here, Heather. And, I do think that there is a component with grudges in that, especially in more of a marriage relationship, and especially where the protection aspect isn't really making a whole lot of sense. If one spouse can say, well, it's my husband's fault or it's my wife's fault that we are where we're at, it oddly enough can be a bit relieving. They then, the person who's holding the grudge, no longer has the responsibility to change things. They say, well, my husband is the one that's being mean and overbearing and controlling. I can't control him, so I can take a step back. I don't have to do anything. I don't have to change how I am. I don't have to admit mistakes. I don't have to look inward. To be quite honest, personal change is really hard. And most everyone is pretty resistant to it. I don't know about you, Heather, but I spent a long time, resisting changes in my own personal life. I mean, even to this day, even though I talk about changes and helping people change all the time, I can recognize that there are some things that even I resist changing, even though I know it might be better if I do things differently. You understand what I mean, right, Heather? Absolutely.
I don't think you're human if you're not like resistant to some level of change. If you actually look at from like oh my goodness, I can't talk. From psychology and neuroscience, it's like we've built up these beliefs to protect us, and we will die for our beliefs. Like we will go to the grave defending what our brain has told us will keep us safe. And until we really recognize that it's not serving us in the best way and that it's okay to let those things go, that we can replace those beliefs with new empowering beliefs, then we're going to hold on to them and we're going to defend them and we're going to believe them and we're going to live them out year after year after year. And so it's just kind of the way our brains are structured, that we really resist change because change is scary. And you can even look at like evolution theory or whatever, but like change meant you could get hurt. Change meant you could get cast out from the tribe or whatever. And we can't really survive well on our own. We need human beings. We need the tribe. We need the community to survive. And so anything that's outside of that is threatening and scary and unknown. And so we'd rather not go there, even if it's not really serving us. So that's one of the really crucial things that we do here at High Thrive Coaching is we don't just look at those, symptom issues, but we really go deep into why are we feeling this way? And is there a way that we can still feel safe and protected and get that need met while making some progress on things that would serve us better, some beliefs that would empower us and heal things rather than cause the same cycles to repeat themselves.
I found it interesting. You brought up a little bit of that neurobiology, and I don't mean to get off on too much of a tangent, but you're right on that one as well. Like in terms of resisting change, our brain doesn't, like, just biologically doesn't like much change either.
Mm-hmm.
Like our brain really likes to make things efficient and streamline things. So it says, okay, if I keep seeing this fear or pain, I'm going to make it so I don't have to spend as many resources, dwelling on that. So I'm going to make this nice big track here in the brain to make it easy to go down that path. And so when you say, okay, I want to think about something different, I want to maybe feel healthy or healing, you're almost having to biologically, you're forging a new path.
Right.
And you can, if you keep going down that path, your brain will eventually say, okay, well, he or she keeps thinking about this, maybe I'll create a new path over here to make this path easier. But yeah, you're right. Biologically, it's just we resist change in that way as well, until we kind of get used to it a little bit. But anyways, keeping on going, like with that responsibility thing, it's just simply easier to have a scapegoat for things. If you can say my husband or my wife is to blame, it's just so much easier. And then you can relieve yourself of responsibility, and you can hold on to this pain as long as you can, because it means so much more comfort, ease. It means you don't have to do anything. And that's really why people hold on to these grudges so much energy and effort. And like you said, Heather, it just isn't healthy in the long run. So the big question becomes then, if there is a purpose here, if it does serve to protect us on some levels, having a grudge can be seen in healthy regards, but when does it turn unhealthy is kind of the big question. And I'm going to just point out, I don't think, the very definition of like grudge, holding on to past pain or offense, I don't think it's ever really healthy. It might be like a decent stopgap or a decent way to serve some purposes, but ultimately it's not the best good. But I do think it turns unhealthy, when it prevents you, when it's specifically blocking you from going down a healthier path. When a healthier path presents itself and you don't take that path because of the grudge, I think that's when this really becomes a problem and really starts causing a whole lot of other issues in your life, like when you're trying to repair a marriage, for instance.
Yeah.
I don't know, Heather. What do you think? It's I know there's probably a lot of our clients out there, or our listeners, that may be holding on to grudges or might be seeing their spouse hold on to grudges. Is there ever really, a time when that's okay?
Well, okay. I'll preface that with, I guess, that I believe every human emotion is good. And I used to think that some human emotions were bad. Like, you shouldn't feel mad. You shouldn't feel depressed. You shouldn't feel anxiety. Like, those are bad emotions. I shouldn't feel, I don't know, just anger or anything like that. And so there's a lot of shame when coupled on top of feeling a bad emotion, if you have that kind of mentality. And I think a lot of us do, because we're told not to, as children, like not to yell and like throw a fit, and, so we get kind of shamed into thinking that those are bad emotions. I think they're only maybe unhealthy when we stay stuck in them, but that feeling any emotion is okay. And so I think that you can give yourself some grace that, wow, this really hurt me. And I feel like I need to protect myself, and that is serving a purpose, because your brain's saying, and your spirit, whatever, all of you is saying, like, emotionally, like, this is not okay. I need to do something to protect myself. And so what we do is we kind of take that shortest route of saying, okay, well, I'm just going to make sure this bad thing never happens again. And so anything that like looks or smells or feels close to it, we're going to immediately put up that wall, and that kind of red flag comes up, that defense mechanism. I hope that you can relate to what I'm saying a little bit. And so in that way, I think the signal is healthy, and it's okay to say, I need to protect myself. I need to feel safe. I need to make sure I don't get hurt in this way. And I can also understand that when Mark and I, we're saying on this side of things like, grudges are unhealthy, you should just let them all go. That can feel really terrifying if you built up a really strong defense mechanism to keep you safe from pain. And you're like, well, then what else is there? Well, we're going to go into that. And like, how else could I protect myself without holding on to this? So if I can, I'm just going to be vulnerable. And I always like to just share from my heart what I've gone through, and maybe that resonates with you. So when I was 18, I'm not going to go into super specifics because it's very personal and there's people I have to protect in the sharing of this, but I've alluded to it here before. But I just want to like show how this affected me and how maybe it was healthy to a certain degree, but then how it became unhealthy. Okay. Because it almost always at some level becomes unhealthy when we stay stuck in that and we don't move through it. So for me, when I was 18 years old, someone very near and dear to me, someone that I know, very personally, and my whole life had been this kind of exemplary person, and just in every sense of the way, integritist, honest, kind, loving, faithful, all of these things. And truth came out that this person that I knew very closely was living a double life, and that they had done some really damaging things to our family, and a lot of betrayal of trust. And my whole world, honestly, as an 18-year-old, you're a young adult, I'm just like trying to figure out things for myself, but it really just shook the foundations of what everything I thought was true, because this was such a close person to me and a really big foundational piece of who I was and what I thought was real. And then I just started to question everything. If this person could be convincing me my whole life that they were one way, but then they could go and do these things, how can I believe anything anymore? And it hurt deeply. It hurt my family, and it hurt me. And there was really no reconciliation ever made in the way that I was hoping, right? There was no, I ask you to forgive me, right? I'm sorry. Let me hear out how this has affected you, those kind of things. So having that reality just kind of ripped from me and having my heart completely hurt deeper than probably anything had ever hurt me before, I went on to just kind of deal with it. And for me, it became the new normal. And I think that a lot of people could probably relate to this. We've been hurt deeply. There's really no reconciliation. The other person doesn't really want to change or make it right. And so what do? You just kind of get on with living. And I lived with that kind of a pain inside me, but I suppressed it. I didn't let myself feel it so much. And I know that a lot of our clients have expressed similar things. And for me, I went into marriage, and this was a huge part of what had been shaken. It was my idea of what marriage is, and honesty and faithfulness and integrity, and all those things. And so I went into my marriage with Ben at 20. We got married at 20 and had our first child. And I still continued to carry this pain inside me. And it honestly wasn't until I was diagnosed with cancer at 29. Okay, so pay attention to that timeline, 11 years of holding on to this, that I realized that it was actually like literally killing me. And I'm not saying this is true for everyone, but for me, I knew that was what was going on, that I carried this bitterness, I'd carried this hurt and this pain for so many years, that it was like now affecting my body, because there's an incredible connection between our mind, our emotions, and our physical self. Our entire nervous system is connected. And so that was a huge wake-up call to me. And then I could look back and realize, wow, all of these times when I didn't trust Ben, all these times when I felt like I wasn't good enough, all these times when I felt like he's going to leave me, he's going to betray me. Yeah, it's great that he seems like such a nice guy, but eventually the truth is going to come out, the truth is going to come out. And I held that story, that we're going to talk about stories, and this whole thing. into the future because I didn't know how to let it go. I didn't know how to heal. I didn't even know if I wanted to try because it was too scary. I felt like if I let it go, well, then I'm definitely going to get hurt. So I need to have my watch guard out, right? So I don't know if you can relate to that as you're listening to this, but that's what happened for me. And I can see now how, that story, that grudge, it was applicable at one point, but then I carried it forward to the point where it wasn't applicable anymore. And I was projecting my fears and my hurts onto Ben in a situation where it was completely inappropriate because it wasn't his thing. It was my thing. And it wasn't his doing at all. And he wasn't giving any reason for me to believe those things. Yet it was my story that I was bringing and projecting onto him and creating hurt and chaos. So bringing that all to answer your question here, Mark, sorry for the long story, but I feel like it's the best way I can answer this with my heart, is that there was a place where I needed to protect myself. I needed to learn some important things about life, but then I carried it on years and years and years and years and years to the point where it was like going to ruin literally, it was like going to ruin my marriage and it was ruining my health and it could have taken my life. And I know that sounds dramatic, but I had to get to that point to then realize I need to change this and I need to let this go. And once I did, then I started to heal my body. I started to heal my heart, and my marriage started to heal as well, because that root issue that was deep inside me was now gone. It was now healed. And I could literally say I was in bondage before to it. And now I felt freedom and I felt that sense of relief and that weight was taken off of me.
No, thanks for sharing. Heather, you do have a really great story, and it kind of then makes sense how you've gotten to this point in your life because of the things that have happened to you. But I want to shift this because you obviously let go of what had happened to you, and I want to talk a little bit about how you mentioned the story that we have. So I'm gonna admit I borrowed these sort of ideas from I like to borrow ideas from different treatment methods, different areas. Specifically, I was thinking, in terms of grudges or really deep problems within a relationship. And I'm just gonna say my neighbor has suddenly started up what sounds like a chainsaw, so you might hear that in the background. This is going right back to our raw recordings. There we go. But anyways, the story was important. Here, like I said, I borrowed some of the ideas from what is sometimes done for patients with, say, PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder. And a not uncommon way to address that is what's sometimes referred to as narrative therapy. The idea is that your story or narrative just really has a huge impact on how you approach the world. In other terms, this is all kind of under the umbrella of CBT, or cognitive behavioral therapy. In other terms, like these deeper, more deeply held beliefs, the story or the narrative or these grudges that we might hold, might be referred to as intermediate or sometimes core beliefs, depending on how they're coming out. But basically, your narrative or your beliefs are all about how you describe the world, and in large part, it puts almost like this lens in front of you on how you describe what goes on. It really has an impact on how you act and how you feel. So, for instance, Heather, you were talking about how this event happened, and it really shifted your narrative, your story, and you started holding certain beliefs about how you had certain beliefs about how relationships, marriages should be, and now your story was different, and it took a long time to let go of this. And at each point, these narrative points really had a big impact on how you viewed relationships. And it's the same thing within a personal relationship, like your marriage. If you come into a marriage having a certain narrative saying, marriages should be loving and close, and my husband should bring me flowers at least bi-monthly or something like that, and it doesn't happen, then you start describing things as there's something wrong. because this is kind of the rules which govern marriages, your beliefs about marriages, your story. Or another example, if, hypothetically, this isn't happening, but hypothetically, if I told myself that my wife was cheating on me and I kept believing it without maybe addressing it with her, then I would be much more likely to ask her about maybe her whereabouts. I might check her phone. I might be suspicious of her answers to my questions. My story has a huge impact on how I approach my relationship with my wife in this hypothetical suspicious situation. Same thing with grudges here. So what I'm getting at here is your narrative has an impact on how you behave, and then therefore has an impact on those around you. In that same example, this hypothetical example of me being suspicious of my wife, if I'm checking in on her and checking her phone and being suspicious of her answers, she's going to pick up on that. And, she's going to feel like I'm more suspicious, that I don't trust her, and she's going to back away quite a bit more. It's going to be very highly unlikely in this hypothetical situation that I'd be really able to connect on a deep level with my wife. And so why I'm explaining this, why I'm explaining a narrative or a story and, these core beliefs that one might hold, it has a big connection with grudges. And so letting go of your own grudges becomes about coming up with a new narrative or story. Once again, going back to the PTSD sort of treatment, that narrative therapy, what is sometimes done with people who've gone through these huge traumatic events that really shift their own narrative, their own beliefs, is they go back and write out, they take a look at their story and they make adjustments. They say, okay, this is what happened. They might say with a professional, and so now we want to look at the same situation and tell a different story about what happened, something more healthy. They look for healthier ways to describe what's going on in their life, healthier ways to describe what happened to them. And there are certain things that I think are really important to consider when you are looking at your own narrative and what to adjust. I think you really need to take a close look at the intentions of your spouse. How are you describing their intentions? Your judgment on how your spouse might have been viewing the situation themselves surrounding whatever that grudge event. Were they viewing this? Sometimes people might hold on to a grudge saying, my husband thinks I'm worthless. My husband thinks that I'm no good. That's why they need to control this. So here are intentions and their perspective. You need to look at your own reasons for not actually addressing the grudge or trying to solve it. And you need to look at your own responsibility for what, where you were at and what's going on, with everything surrounding that grudge. I think those things are really important to take a close look at, to really examine, and to ask yourself, okay, are these healthy ways to look at these things?
I think another good question to add to this would be like, what is the cost of holding on to this grudge? What is the effect that it's been having on my life? Like, where all could it have been showing up? And what is the cost that it has played for me up until this point? And then what is the cost if I continue to hold on to this into the future? For me, I realized that if I didn't heal some of these things going on inside myself, even at the point where I was thinking that Ben and I would probably get a divorce at one point, that if I didn't heal what was going on inside myself, that it was going to stay with me into the future. And that while I wanted to say it was just, Ben and it was like all him, I had a quieter part of myself, a deeper part of myself say, it's not that. This is something that you need to heal inside yourself. And if you don't, you're going to bring it into the future, into the next relationship, into everything that you do, into your relationship with your children, your relationship with your extended family. And that was a cost that I felt was too great to bear. And that the whole like defense mechanism part of me was able to say, okay, we can let this go now. There's that quote, and I'm probably not going to get it exactly right. It's a little bit of a saying, right? But that holding on to, like, being unwilling to forgive someone, holding on to that pain is like drinking poison and expecting the other person to die, right? It's not the way that it works. It's that every time we hold on to that negative energy, every time that we choose not to forgive, the only person that we're really hurting is ourselves. Sometimes we think that it's hurting the other person. And in some ways it you know, probably it does have a negative effect, but the person that it's hurting most of all is yourself. And so choosing to say, I want to heal, I want to be happy, I want to be well, I want to be, you know, trusting, I want to be sound within myself, is what can then allow you to let that start to go. And it doesn't justify what the other person did. It doesn't excuse what the other person did. But it allows you to have that healing that you need to build to move forward with happiness. And for me, I think one of the big questions that came up in my mind was, you know, if I can't forgive this person for the things that they've done, then how can I ask for forgiveness for the things that I've done? And taking that look at myself, like you said, you know, I hear like your own responsibility in what's going on, but realizing, you know, I've hurt people too. Maybe not to that same degree, hopefully not, honestly, but I have hurt people and I have made mistakes. I have done wrong things. And if I can't be forgiven of those things myself, then, you know, if I can't forgive this person, basically I'm saying I can't forgive myself. And that's just something I can't live with. I can't subscribe to that. I believe that we've all hurt each other. We've all made mistakes and that we all deserve forgiveness. And so knowing that if I deserve forgiveness and this other person deserves forgiveness, even if they're not asking for it, even if they haven't changed, even if they continue to do wrong and hurtful things, but if I don't forgive them, then how can I ask for forgiveness myself? And I believe we're all deserving of forgiveness and mercy.
Yeah, you're pointing out like other questions that you might want to ask yourself, and certainly like there's a lot of questions that you could ask yourself in going over something like this. And by no means is this meant to be a comprehensive list that we're going over right now. Actually, I think we're on the topic of grudges, on letting go of grudges. We're really just scratching the surface on all of this. You know, we still could have a whole lot of discussion on maybe helping your spouse let go of grudges, helping someone else to come to that healthy point, or, you know, specific exercises to go over to let go of those grudges yourself. There's, like I said, we're just scratching the surface, and that's kind of the limitation of the podcast that we have here is, you know, we're able to kind of bring up these discussions and talk about this a bit, but, you know, it's a bit harder to go in depth without more time and focus, which is why we have our whole other, all of our other programs and whatnot to kind of support this here.
Yeah. And so Mark, you were just sharing with me that, and you're actually devoting this month's, we do a monthly marriage like subscription program, and that this month you're going to go deep into this. You want to give a little teaser about what's going to happen?
Yeah, no, I'm glad you brought that up. Yes, so I do for those of you who are already signed up, you're probably well aware, but yes, I put out a very, very in-depth training about once a month on various topics. So I look in to see what are people asking about, what are people needing help with, to kind of help decide the topic for that month. And this month is about, it's about letting go of past pain, letting go of grudges, and also helping your spouse to do that, which is I'm going to just say it's a monumental task to undertake, but there are lots of things that can be done. You know, Heather, you're talking about how you overcame some big hurdles yourself in your own story. I'm going to admit that I've not always been the proactive one in changing my own story, but I will say that my wife Jennifer has been a huge support in my life. And, you know, I had to look back on, okay, well, what were those moments when I was really holding on to some of my own pain, and I experienced someone, like my wife, being very supportive to help me come away from that. And what really was what mechanically was actually happening in those moments to allow me to consider another point of view. And so, yeah, I'm going to be going into all of that. I'm going to be going into very specific exercises because our programs are very action oriented. So we're going to be going into all those exercises, what you can specifically do to either let go of those grudges yourself or help your spouse to do so as well.
Yeah, and for those who aren't members already, we are going to offer a 14-day free trial, so you can try it out and see if you love it, and we think you will, and we hope you will. And so you can get the free 14-day trial. The link for that is relationshipRebootCourse.com/free trial. I know that's
free. The free trial is free-trial.
Free-trial, yeah. Thank you.
Below. Now this is something new, isn't it? Like we haven't been doing this before, if I remember correctly.
Well, no, we've actually given it here and there occasionally. We like to be able to offer it, but we've never announced it here on the podcast. So
okay, so yeah, I'm gonna admit I'm not always connected 100% to all the marketing. I was like, oh, we're doing a free trial. So I'm much more connected to those. I usually put a lot of the material together, so it sounded new to me.
Yeah, no worries. We're also going to give you that link if you are our podcast subscriber. If you want to become a podcast subscriber, and we often give, impactful trainings or some of our free guides. We'll create guides just for you guys and next steps kind of things. You can become a podcast subscriber over at thrivingmarriagepodcast.com. That's a little bit easier of a URL. So if you want to just join that, then I'll make sure I get you the link for the 14-day free trial. That's thrivingmarriagepodcast.com. This is the Thriving Marriage Podcast. So it's pretty easy. Just add a .com and you're there. Cool. All right. Now, Mark, let's go over to our marriage Mythbuster. This is one that I've heard in my life. I was asking everyone here in the Thriving Marriage Facebook group, what was some of the best marriage advice that you've heard? What's some of the worst marriage advice you've ever heard? And this is one of the ones that I think is a little controversial. And for me, I'm going to put it into actually some of the worst marriage advice I've ever heard. Some of you said it was some of the best marriage advice that you've ever heard. So it's a little bit of that gray area. Is this actually a myth or not? But I just don't want anyone to take this as absolute truth because you've probably heard it. So without further ado, what are we even talking about?
I thought this was an interesting topic to bring up because I was like, so I'm going to just say Heather usually picks out these myths. And she'll present the topic to me, and then I'll give some thought to it. And then so when you presented this one to me, I was like, oh, that's really interesting, because I was like, is that actually good advice? Is it not advice? And you were exactly what you said there. It's this sort of polarizing thing. Like some people think it's really a good idea, some it's not. Now, here's the thing, and the reason why I'm glad you brought this up is because these adages, these kind of common sayings about relationships and marriages, sometimes we take them as absolute truths. Just like you said there, when I think, in terms of relationships, there really should be very, 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 very few absolute truths. I'm struggling to even think of any off the top of my head. Maybe, things like, okay, don't cheat on your spouse. It's certainly a good truth to live by. But, even with something like that, we can approach it with some understanding and solve that. It's just, in terms of advice, yes, very few absolute truths is what I'm getting at. So here's the thing. This myth might actually be really good in some relationships. It might be bad in other relationships. And I'm also going to point out, even in those relationships where it's a good idea, it's not always a good idea, even in those same relationships. The myth part of this adage that you shouldn't go to bed angry is that the myth is that it should apply to all marriages in all situations. So, just some off the top of my head, some questions that came up is like, well, well, what if the argument happened really late at night? What if you're both extremely tired and you're not at your best? Or what if you haven't cooled down and it's at night and you aren't able to talk about the problem civilly? Like, if you're going to be going into an argument like this, if you're saying, well, I can't go to bed angry, so I'm going to really pursue my wife, my husband, what have you, and I'm going to let them know just how I feel, it's probably not a great situation. Another question to ask here is like, okay, if you let it go for the evening, are you actually likely to resolve the issue the next day or at some point in the future? Can you actually let it go for the evening? I'll tell you that for me and my wife, Jen, we tend to lean in this direction where we don't like to go to bed angry. But sometimes we do. And that's the whole point here is sometimes we are still upset when it's time for bed. That's more of a rare occurrence, just because, you know, Jen and I have over the years, that's one skill that we've really tried to hone, is the ability to repair our relationship after we have become upset with each other. That's like, if nothing else, that's like our one superpower is we can cool off and then we can come back and discuss things. But if that's not you, then that's okay. The big thing with arguments, I think, is that you want to be able to discuss arguments when you have been able to cool off. You also don't want to put those arguments off indefinitely, like if you're never going to cool off. And so, like, really the reality here, the actual best piece of advice is you need to be mindful of the dynamics of your own relationship, about how you handle conflict. And you want to, say, avoid going to one extreme where you are always avoiding the problem and it's never coming up. And you also want to avoid the other extreme way over here where you are pursuing and pursuing and pursuing to the point where, you know, one party or the other feels chased or unready to discuss, or, you know, like they feel like at a disadvantage in some way, shape, or form. Yeah, you had something to add here.
Well, yeah, just this was an interesting one to me. This is advice that Ben and I were given before we were married. And I shook my head and I was like, yeah, that sounds great. Like, yeah, never go to bed angry. In fact, never even be angry. That was my naivety, right? But yeah, and so Ben and I sometimes would exhaust ourselves thinking that, okay, we can't go to bed angry, we can't go to bed angry, we can't go to bed angry. And the hour would drag on, we'd get more tired, and it would just get worse and worse and worse. And then I felt like we were failing when we would go to bed angry. I felt like there's something wrong with us. We're not supposed to go to bed angry. Like, I took this piece of advice so much to heart that it was actually damaging. So I think that's a little bit of the warning there, is that just be mindful of what advice you listen to and do what works for you. For me, I'm like Cinderella with a pumpkin. Like, I am like done at like 9:30 p.m. Like, I shouldn't solve any problems or like go into anything deep because I am just exhausted. And that's not a great time for me to have great problem solving skills. And so just knowing that about Ben and I, like the other night we were starting to get into something a little bit, again, a really sensitive topic. And I was just like, Ben, we're both tired. This is just not the right time. And he's like, you're right. Let's go to bed. We can talk about this later. So we had a plan of when we would address it later. And we both recognized now is not the right time. So bottom line is, just be mindful of what advice you choose to listen to, and don't take anything, especially like, you know, just a saying or an adage, as absolute truth. Each of us have our own journey and our relationships are each very unique. And so we need to find what works for us. But if you're needing more help with this, if you're needing more guidance, then reach out to one of us so we can help you with it.
Yes.
Any final thoughts on that, Mark?
No, I think we wrapped it up pretty well. We kind of got out of order here. We were supposed to talk about our our program, but we already did that. So I think we can call it good for the day here.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Mark. And thank you, everyone, for joining. Again, I was really excited to talk about grudges because I felt trapped by grudges and pain and hurt for a really long time. And then learning how to free myself of that has been absolutely the best thing that's ever happened in my life. And so if you're feeling like that, if you're feeling stuck, then I encourage you to take action on that and determine what's going to be a better thought for you, a better action to get into. And again, if you really want to learn more about this, if you want to learn how to help your spouse overcome a grudge that they're holding for you or in their life, which we didn't really talk about much today, but then again, I would encourage you to get that free 14-day trial. relationshiprebootcourse.com/free trial. Subscribe to the podcast at thrivingmarriagepodcast.com, and we'd be happy to get you that and get you more, keep the conversation going and get you more help with that. We know that you guys are working hard on your marriage, and we honor you for that. So thank you. And next week, we're going to share with you steps to create a unified vision for your family and your marriage. Especially if you're feeling like you guys are going in a little bit of opposite directions, how can you create a unified vision for your marriage and your family? Thank you so much, Mark, and thank you, everyone, for joining us.
See you, everyone.
Thanks for listening to The Thriving Marriage, your A to Z blueprint for not just surviving marriage, but thriving. Until next time, my friends, thrive on.